Hey everybody, Psychosaurus is here. Welcome back to Age of Empires Online. And today, yes, it is time. So since last time I made the video about ranged units, now it's time to talk about siege units. And yeah, if you wanna check out my previous videos, I already did infantry, cavalry, and ranged units. You can. Please watch them. Tell me what do you think about them. Do you like those videos? I mainly am trying to make these videos for new players to learn about the units in general. But yeah, I'll gladly read your opinions in the comment section. So please watch those. Tell me your opinion. Do you find these videos useful? But anyway, let's talk about the siege units since we are here. Siege units I would describe as very expensive but very powerful units. At the same time, they can be quite vulnerable. Usually they are like very expensive on wood and then also some gold. Typically you train them either at the siege workshops, which is a structure available to 5 of the civs, as you can see, or you can train them at your fortresses. Now obviously there are many kinds of siege units, so I'll tell you like where you can train them, but the main thing you should remember, typically your siege units are trained at the siege workshops, and then Palintonons or throwers are trained at the fortress. Obviously there are exceptions. For example, Celts, Indians, and Norse can train their siege units only at the fortresses. And Egyptians are the only ones that are not training any siege unit at the fortress, but they train everything at the siege workshop, even their Palintonon. So that's what you should remember. Anyway, we have still like a number of siege units, different kinds, different purpose. As you can see, I spread them again. Similar to ranged units, like, oh my god, I was like, how do I do this? And yeah, here it is. So let's start with your first siege unit, which you will get access to. And those are rams. So rams, very expensive, as I said, cost a lot of wood, some gold. Now what is good about them, and I'm talking about these 4 right here at first. So you have the Greek one, Roman one, Persian one, and the Egyptian, which is called Siege Tower actually. These are actually very strong against buildings. If you take a look at the damage, you can see it's like some crush damage, and then a huge bonus against the buildings. So that's the main purpose of this unit, and practically it's the only purpose of this unit, because that's the only thing they can attack. They can attack only buildings, because they do crush damage. They will do the full damage, and along with this huge bonus, you can see like 5 times 32 DPS. Oof, 160 DPS against buildings. That's huge. Okay, so these just remember, this is like no gear, no milestone, no advisor, nothing. This is just pure damage. Just from the start you get. So of course you can imagine how strong they can get with the gear. But anyway, that's the main purpose. They attack buildings, they destroy them real fast. Now one good thing is that usually there are static defenses like towers, fortresses, town centers. These rams also have very huge pierce armor, which is, as you can see, 0.85. This is even more than what buildings do have by default. So they are very resilient to pierce damage. You should remember that. That's why you should not be afraid to use them, and you should not be afraid of them taking some damage. But yeah, you can also see that they have some resilience to melee damage, the infantry and cavalry damage. That should help them survive a little bit longer, but as you can see, their health is not like super high for a 3 pop unit, because remember, like 1 pop units get like 200 plus health, like for example infantry units, you know, like spearmen, hippospis, those usually have like 230, so 440 for a 3 pop unit. I mean, it's a good amount of health, but it's not that great. Remember, cavalry units are like, they get like 400 health as well. Like, yeah, this is not looking that good, but that armor should help them. Now, one thing I should mention, most of the siege units you can repair with your villagers. So once you get access to them, you don't need to worry about priests, no. Except for a few exceptions, of course, but about those later. But yeah, you can repair them with your villagers. Obviously, it costs resources, and it's, I would say, quite expensive to repair siege units. But hey, if you can utilize the high armor those siege units have, hey, it's a good value. Remember that. But yeah, these are the rams. Remember, they attack only buildings. They do a lot of damage to buildings, and since it's their only purpose, yeah, it will make sense. They can soak a lot of pierce damage, so remember, you could practically use them against ranged units as well to just soak the damage as well. They are somewhat resilient, but they will not last too long against melee damage, so careful, especially when you see units like Volt Raiders or the Norse Horsemen that do bonus damage against siege. They will just destroy the rams real fast, so careful around those. And most important, remember to be careful around enemy siege units that deal crush damage. As you can see, 0 crush armor. So if you see some enemy siege units that deals crush damage, careful with your rams, okay? You should be careful with that. And also, I forgot to mention, siege units have higher conversion resistance. You can see it, it takes twice as long to convert a siege unit. So again, this applies to rams as well, but many other siege units as well. I think all of them actually. And usually siege units are also very slow. So as you can see, 4.5 movement speed. So that's like 25% slower than normal speed for infantry. So yeah, very slow, but once they get in range, they can soak a lot of damage from the static defenses. So yeah, remember they are slow, okay? So try to build your siege workshops closer to the enemy bases, so it does not take forever for your rams to get there. But yeah, as I said, these are the 4 rams. Remember, against buildings, repair them. Great ones. Then we have like few more rams, and I'll mention them right now, because as you can see, I split them into like 3 groups. So we have these. Then we have the Babylonian Siege Tower. About that a little bit later. I'll explain it why. But let's move on to these rams. And this is the Indian ram, the Norse Farbjorder, which is also a ram, and then the Celtic ram. Now these, practically they are the same thing, except they might be faster, I think. Yeah, they are a little bit faster than these mechanical counterparts. Most important, you can also see they do not take too much population space. These were taking 3, now these guys are taking only 2, so it's slightly better. But as you can see, they still have like quite low health, which, sure, the armor helps, but yeah, they're still vulnerable to damage, especially the melee and especially the crush damage. So you should be careful with those. And just like with the mechanical units, they are able to attack only buildings. Farbjorder is one exception because it gets champion upgrade that allows them to attack units. So yeah, Farbjorders can be used against units, but the main purpose is still to use it against structures. But just so you know why Farbjorder actually has this high crush damage, which was actually changed, okay? But it makes sense for them to do so much crush damage because they can later attack units as well. But yeah, if you take a look at the values, they practically do the same damage. But yeah, one thing you should notice, these guys are actually costing food instead of gold, unlike these rams. So you should remember these guys cost food. And I want to use this as one indicator, because one difference about these guys, and that's the huge difference, is they actually are not repairable by villagers. These guys are actually healable by priest units. So you should remember that, because this is especially important for, let's say, the Celtic ram, because you actually have access to druids that can heal during the combat. And because of that, hey, your rams can soak a lot more damage from the enemy static defenses. And not only that, because druids also buff the damage, they can do more damage to the structures. So you should remember that. And if you're playing in co-op, then you can use probably someone like Egyptian for your allies to heal your rams as well. So for example, the Priestess of Ra healing your far beholders. Whew, that can be interesting. Or maybe even like Romans with their Clinicus to heal your units, and that's a strong healer right there, okay? So combining those together, whew, that could be some interesting fight. Man, I want to see that. Like, if you know about some clip like that, ooh, I want to see that. But anyway, yeah, so remember these guys cost food and use that as indicator that they can be healed. Anyway, they serve the same purpose as the mechanical rams, so attack mainly buildings, do a lot of damage to buildings, they can soak a lot of pierce damage, and yeah, they can take some melee damage as well, but remember they still have low health, so it's not ideal, and especially be careful around units that do crush damage, like Siege. So yeah, moving on, and I'm gonna skip the Babylonian Siege Tower. I'm gonna move on to this one, which is the Persian War Wagon. Now, usually siege units are used against buildings, but of course there are siege units that are used mainly against units, and War Wagon is one of those units. So the thing about War Wagon is they are available only to Persians. Just like any other siege, very high pierce armor, they are slow, they are expensive. And the main difference is this is actually a siege unit that deals pierce damage, not crush damage. Remember that. This is one of those exceptions. So yeah, as you can see, pierce damage, and most important, it deals the damage in area. Okay, they have splash damage. So they are perfect for killing large groups of enemies. So remember that. And of course, be careful when they have high pierce armor, because that might not be ideal for your war wagons. But yeah, what I should mention, like I said, the rams are weak to melee units because, hey, they can do a lot of damage, and crush damage is also their weakness. This is the same thing, except there is no melee armor, so yes, they are vulnerable to melee units, but infantry, since usually is slow, it might not be ideal for your infantry units to counter them. Instead, you should use your faster units, so cavalry units ideally. But hey, if you're playing as scouts, Wolf Traders are great as well. And ideally, if they are resilient to pierce damage as well. So units like, let's say, Raiders, Asabaras, Hippicans, Wolf Traders, as I mentioned. Ulfhedins can be used as well, but I would rather use the Raiders. And yeah, Horsemen as well, because they can do bonus damage to siege as well. And I don't know, like elephants. Yeah, elephants are great against war wagons. That should be perfect right there. So yeah, careful with your war wagons. Make sure to protect them. And unlike the rest of the siege units, they actually don't have minimum range. I need to remind this myself as well. But yeah, these units do not have minimum range, so they can attack units that are actually next to them. So careful with that if you're fighting those. And remember, that's also your advantage when you're using them. So yeah, no minimum range. Deals pierce damage, ideal for killing large groups of enemy units. They are not super resilient to pierce damage, okay? So infantry units, yes, perfect. Especially if it's like anti-infantry units, spearmen, you know. If you're fighting like shield bearers for the Babylonians, yeah, be careful around those. Those might soak a lot of damage. But yeah, if there's a lot of them in the area, it still can be good for your war wagons. But yeah, that's gonna be it. I don't think I forgot anything. Okay, and now finally to the Babylonian Siege Tower. Now, this unit is like the mechanical rams, okay? It has good armor, as you can see, huge pierce armor. That's practically gonna be the same for all the siege units. So yeah, the pierce armor is there. Bonus versus buildings, it's slightly weaker, as you can see. It's only 4 times, but you can see in this case it has a lot of health, like huge, but also it's like taking more space. So you have 800 health for 5 pop unit. I mean, that's not bad. Let's be honest, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. The armor is there for melee units. Again, vulnerable to crush damage. So basically, it's just like the other RAM units. Also, I forgot the Egyptian is 4 pop, yeah, 4 population, but 500 health, still weak, but this is a lot better. Now, why did I put it right here? Because Siege Tower for the Babylonians has actually one ability, and no other siege unit has this. They can actually garrison units inside of them, and when there are garrisoned units inside of the Babylonian siege tower, they can actually attack units with a ranged attack that deals pierce damage. So at that moment, they work similarly as the war wagons. So you can garrison, let's say, villagers inside. It can be bowmen, it can be lancers, whatever unit you want. It will do the same amount of damage depending on the number of units inside. But yeah, so if you have, let's say, the lancers inside or villagers, it doesn't matter because it will be the same damage. Now what I'd like to do is like garrison inside villagers, and then I can eject them and use them to repair the siege towers, which makes sense because they have the huge armor. So you can do that. Or you can, like, for example, load in sappers, and then once you're near the fortress, or the fortress is focusing the siege tower, you can eject the sappers and use them to destroy the fortress while the siege tower is taking the damage. That is also a possibility. So there are definitely many possibilities you could think of with these units. And of course, you can use them for transportation as well. But yeah, other than that, it's just, think of this as the mechanical battering ram that's slightly more expensive, but also has great health. Especially after champion upgrade, they will get even more health, like huge. That I think it doubles the amount of health. So if you have H4 champion siege towers for the Babylonians, that's a lot of health. They can soak so much damage. That's really the strength of this siege tower. That's why it's like one of the most used rams in the game, okay, in PvE at least. And since they also have the range attack just like the war wagon, hey, you can use them to deal with large groups of enemies as well. So there's that, like the siege tower, yeah, very strong unit. Now there is one very similar unit, and that's the Greek Helepolis, which is the advisor unit trained at the fortress. Now it works similarly as the Babylonian siege tower. So it works like a ram against buildings. Now, unlike the Babylonian siege tower, it actually does not need units garrisoned inside to actually use the ranged attack. So this unit actually has 2 attacks, okay? One that deals crush damage and is used only against buildings. So you can see the bonus versus buildings is there. But also the base crush damage is just very high. So that's a lot of damage, like 144 if we compare it. For the Persian, for example, which is 160 DPS, yes, it's slightly weaker, but at the same time, hey, the ranged attack is there, so these guys can actually defend themselves. Also, I forgot to mention, the siege tower also does not have the minimum range like the war wagon, and the same thing goes for the Helepolis. So there is no minimum range. You can use them to attack the units, great for larger groups of, let's say, infantry units. Or even range, like, hey, if you have like large groups of ranged units being annoying, these units, since they can soak a lot of pierce damage, yes, they can obliterate the ranged units. That's probably the best usage. So yeah, something slower, like let's say the bowman or the anti-ranged, even though, yeah, they have pierce armor, whatever, but if there's a large group of them, yeah, you can do a lot of damage to them. So remember that. Now, Helepolis, it behaves as a ram, the mechanical one, but unfortunately it does not have the melee damage. Now, because it has the ranged attack, I think it makes sense because they can defend themselves against the melee units. But at the same time, yeah, be careful. Make sure to keep the distance and ideally use something for a meat shield to protect them. They are not super tanky as the Babylonian siege tower. So same as the war wagons. Make sure to protect them with some melee units for a meat shield, for example. In case of war wagons, it would be Sparabaras. In this case, it would be like hoplites. So yeah, careful with that. Anyway, that's gonna be all for the Rams. Hopefully I did not forget anything. So let's move on to the next siege unit, which is gonna be the Roman Scorpio. Now, Roman Scorpio, usually the ranged siege units, except the war wagon, are used against buildings because they do crush damage, they have the long range, and usually bonus against buildings as well. Scorpios, they are actually exception because they do crush damage, but they are more focused against units. And if you take a look at this, look at the stats, you can see, hey, the crush damage is there. They have shorter range, as you can see, 23. It's longer than your typical ranged unit, but at the same time, it's a lot shorter than what your typical siege unit, especially those with crush damage, which we'll get to in a moment. It's a lot lower, okay? But you can see it deals bonus versus infantry, bonus versus ranged. It has the very high pierce armor. It has some infantry armor, so yes, they are not so vulnerable to infantry. And because of the high bonus versus infantry, yes, these units are focused mainly against infantry units. You can see also it's slightly faster, so it can keep up with your Roman army. But yeah, you use them against the units, mainly infantry and ranged. Because of the splash damage, they can actually what's the word? They can actually deal with groups. It's not that good as, let's say, the war wagons, because the war wagons have splash area 2 after champion upgrade, even 3. Scorpios stay at 1, so yes, it's there, but it might not be that useful as it might seem, okay? So yeah, but the thing is, yeah, they can obliterate infantry units. Now, unfortunately, these guys have the minimum range until they get the champion upgrade to remove it. So, yeah, make sure to protect them with some melee units again, whether it's legionaries, spearmen, ekes, whatever you can use, or even your officer units. Now, it might seem like weird, but these guys, you know, this is the siege unit, and you can see like the dudes there carrying the Scorpio, and you might think like, hey, maybe it's similar to the Indian Ram or the Ram that you might actually heal them with your healers. For example, in this case it would be the Clinicus. But unfortunately, no, this is not the case, and this is why I kind of don't like it, because this is the one unit that actually is breaking the rule. Like, I would say if there is like a human being as a siege unit that you would heal, but unfortunately after the Roman release, this is the one unit that's actually breaking the rules. So no, unfortunately you cannot remember it like this anymore. So yeah, you need to repair these guys, okay? And yeah, I forgot to mention war wagons, Helepolis, and the Babylonian siege tower. Those are repairable with your villagers as well. In this case, you can use engineers as well, and that's of course faster repair. Yeah, it's kind of sad because I feel like, yeah, it's kind of breaking the rule, while at the same time, yeah, I'll be honest, I would rather see them being healed than being repaired, because goddamn, these guys take only 2 populations, so you can have many of those, and also quite expensive. Like, whew, that's a expensive unit. Like I said, siege units are very expensive, and Scorpios are no exception. I would say even worse than the Rams. Let me take a look. What is this? 210, so 70 units per pop. This is what, 190? Oof, 95 per pop. That's huge. Okay, that's huge. like I said, siege units cost a lot of resources, but at the same time, they can be very powerful. Now, because these guys are actually using crush damage, this actually brings one advantage. You don't have to research armory upgrade for the attack to do the full damage. They always do the full damage, which is good and bad at the same time, because hey, they cannot get stronger. Kind of bad, but at the same time, yeah, they can do the damage, and at the same time, the enemy cannot get crush armor upgrades at the armory. So yay, it's a yeah, it's good, but at the same time, yeah, it cannot get better against buildings. Now, luckily, because these guys actually do crush damage, they are okay against buildings. Don't forget that buildings have no crush armor, so the crush damage is actually very nice. So if you have large number of those, hey, even those buildings can go down quite fast. But yeah, mainly used against the infantry units, the ranged units. Deals some splash damage. Remember, it deals crush damage as well, so it can be good against buildings and especially against walls. Okay, remember to use the splash damage against the walls. Hey, if you haven't watched my walls video, make sure to watch that as well, where I explain how it works there. But yeah, and as you can guess, weak against the siege units, especially the longer range ones, because yes, the Scorpio has shorter range, so before it reaches them, they can die to those, okay? And of course, cavalry units will obliterate them, okay? Because they are fast and they do a lot of damage. And since there's no cavalry armor, yes, that's their weakness. So careful with your Scorpios and make sure to support them with something. Okay, moving on, and we are still gonna stay with the ranged siege. This time we are going for some H4 siege units. And these are like one of my favorites because they are literally great in the late game. Long range, anti-building siege units. Ballistas, catapults, and onagers. And just so you know, this is Greek ballista, the Egyptian catapult, and the Roman onager. So only these three ships are getting those. The thing is, they are doing crush damage from, I would say, long distance. As you can see, 37 base range, that's huge. They have huge splash area, like free damage area, like that's big, okay? Like, yeah, Scorpio has one, but you will not really see it that much. But when you have three, oh yeah, that hurts. Again, very high pierce armor, high conversion resistance. As you can see, vulnerable to melee units. They are slow as well. Just so you know, hey, very slow, like 4.5 speed. So they are vulnerable to cavalry units. Make sure to protect them again with your, let's say, spears or whatever. If you have like hoplites, whatever you can get, make sure to protect them from the enemy melee units so they do not get close. And you should remember, these guys also have the minimum range, which makes sense because they do a lot of damage, they are very powerful, they need some weaknesses. And of course, they are very expensive, again, okay, like 460 units for ballista, oof, 550 for the catapult, yeah, you're Egyptians, okay, you get the priestess of Ra, but like, what is this, 440 for onager? Man, these are very expensive, and of course super late game, so make sure to protect them because otherwise you're paying a lot of resources to train a new siege unit. God damn. But yeah, as you can see, crush damage, which makes them great against buildings, especially with the bonus. So these are mainly focused against buildings, and of course they can destroy walls really well. Again, watch my walls video. It's very useful for you. Very high pierce armor, no melee armor, like I said, vulnerable to melee units, especially the faster ones. No crush armor, so that means, hey, they can die to enemy siege units, for example. And of course, slow. They're very, very slow. But they can also see pretty far, as you can see. Huge line of sight, like 39. That's very nice, actually. So you can actually avoid the danger with these units if the enemy did not see you. So careful with those, yeah. But anyway, what are these great for? As I said, buildings because of the huge damage, but at the same time, great against large groups of enemies, like that free splash area. That's no joke, okay? That's the main usage. When I use these units, I just give them full damage and let's go destroy the large groups of enemy units. That's what they are great for. Even cavalry units can die from these guys, but of course, it takes longer than, let's say, the infantry units. But yeah, obliterating infantry units, even better than with Scorpios. Scorpios do a lot of damage, but they have shorter range and small splash area. These guys, huge splash area, they can just obliterate those large groups or hurt them, and then let's say your infantry units can finish them off. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else needed to say. So remember, expensive, so make sure to protect them, and if you protect them, make sure to use them against larger groups of enemies, because if you're using them only against one, that's not perfect. They can hurt, but of course, it does not hurt that much if there are no units around. So make sure to attack the larger groups of enemies. Make sure to protect them from faster units, especially cavalry. So some infantry as a front line is perfect. And I would say that's gonna be it. Remember to utilize their long range and just focus them on the damage, because that's all you need on these guys. If you're protecting them well, yeah. Just be careful. They are very slow, okay? So make sure you do not put them into unnecessary danger. And there's one specific one which I need to mention because it is very similar to these, but it's not something you can train, nor even through the advisor units. It's not an advisor unit, but you can see it in some quests when fighting the Greeks, and that's the Greek catapult, which is very specific one. Okay, I think you can see it against the sea peoples in Argus. I think that's where you can see it, and then you can see it during the Cyprus quest line. I think that's where you can see it as well. It's a very specific one. Okay, now as you can see, it has really good health for range siege unit, because if you take a look at the catapult, like 320, ballista is 280, so you can see it's like double the health. I would say weaker damage, sure, same bonus, shorter range, that's needed to say, it has shorter range, but look at that splash area, okay, 5, I believe that's the highest in the game. I don't think there is any other unit, unless there's like a boss, and that would be like very specific boss. I think even the Ice King has like 4 at max. Juggernauts have only 4. So I believe this is the highest you can actually find in the game. So yeah, it's quite dangerous, but luckily it does not get the... Or does it? I think it gets the gear actually. But usually it does not have that high damage, and you can see the base damage is not that bad, at least not for you. It's not the highest, but it can hurt those larger groups of enemies, so careful around those, and yeah, make sure to destroy them from the distance. It's basically the same thing. I need to put it here because you can see it during the quest, and it's like very unique. So yeah, again, weak against faster units. You need to do a lot more damage to them to destroy them, so careful with those. And make sure you don't have like super large groups, because yeah, that's gonna hurt you. So yeah, if you want them, hey, you can convert them. That's also a possibility. Might not be perfect, but yeah, you can use them. I think you can now find them. Are they being used in the... Battle of Opus now? I think they are used there with a lot better range, but I might be wrong, but I know there are some catapults there. I think that those are the Greek ones, maybe I'm wrong, whatever. But yeah, you can see those. They are not trainable, they are not advisor unit, but just so you know, they do exist, okay, in the quests, and they work practically the same, just better against units, okay, larger groups of enemy units. So careful around those. Anyway, we're getting closer to the end, finally. We have Palintons, and Palintons are very specific units, okay? So they are long range, and like when I say long, I mean super long range siege units, because if you saw 37 here being like huge, these guys are going for 55 base range. And you remember, usually when you go Palintons, you focus on Palintons, you can use Timo for extra. I think he used, it used to be 35%, now it's only 25%, so it was even worse before. But now, yeah, you can go only for 25, which is still a lot, okay? Palintons usually go for long range, so you can utilize that huge range, and then you put extra gear, the advisor, and suddenly, hey, those units can get over 100 range, and it's really huge. Now, why would you want to use that? Of course, you can see they have a huge damage with pretty good bonus against buildings. They have some damage, some splash damage, okay? Other than that, it's just very similar to the range siege. Now, the thing is, yeah, they do a lot of damage, but the thing is that their aim is terrible, okay? If you ever try to hit a single target with Palintons, you know it can be really bad. Because goddamn, these guys can actually miss units really hard. Like you see, like, let's say the War Wagon. Now that would not be perfect. Like, let's say the Indian Ram. Like, yeah, you order this Palinton to attack this Indian Ram. It could take like 5 shots before it actually hits the ram. And remember, these guys would take like 1 or 2 hits to die from the Palintons. And Palintons attack slow, so I would say it would be just 1 hit and they're dead. And it could take you like 5 hits before they hit that one unit. Their aim is seriously terrible, okay? So instead, you really want to use these units against buildings, okay? And that's the main purpose. You can see they do a lot of crush damage. They have bonus versus crush damage. And one thing also worth mentioning, they also prioritize buildings over units by default, okay? So if you want them to attack units, you need to manually order them to attack units. Otherwise, they'll just focus buildings. And another thing, and this is one of the reasons why everyone's going for the range build on Palintons, it is you need to actually unpack these units to be able to attack anything, okay? They need to unpack first, and then they can attack, okay? Otherwise, they will not attack anything by default. You need to either order them to attack something, or just click the unpack button, or you can use hotkey if you have it set. I don't think you have them set by default, so you need to set them manually for this. But yeah, either you order it or you need to click the button. Only then they can attack. Now, unfortunately, because they are like this, you cannot move them. So you need to pack them again. And this takes time to actually get them moving again. As you can see, it took forever, like, just so you see. They start moving once they're done. Look how long it took. That's the weakness of Palintons. Once they are unpacked, they cannot move. So if you can get units anywhere near them, and again, these units have minimum range. So if you get something fast, let's say cavalry units, near them, and those Palintons are not protected, they're done, okay? They're dead. And again, they are very, very expensive. Not to mention, you need to build a fortress to train these units. Only exception being the Egyptian siege workshop, but also that's coming with a disadvantage, because the Egyptian Palinton is the only one that's taking 60 seconds to train. Unlike the ones that train at the fortress that take actually 30 seconds to train one. Egyptian one takes 60 seconds, so twice as long. Now luckily you can have multiple siege workshops to produce multiple Palindrons at the same time, very easily, very fast. But it will take really long to produce them. Of course, you can use Priestess of Ra to produce them faster, that should help. But yeah, it takes really long time for Egyptians, okay, remember that. But anyway, yes, remember they need to unpack and pack, and of course, why to use the long range build? Because you unpack them once, they can sit in that one spot for a long time until they destroy everything in the area. Now you can imagine 55 range. Now imagine you double actually the area. Well, because of how the area of the because you have doubled the radius, the area is actually quadrupled. Okay, so so that's a huge difference, of course. And destroying like everything from longer distance, safer for your Palindrons. You don't have to get that close to the danger. And so you just fight with your melee units or whatever army you have, and the Palindrons are sitting safely in the back, destroying the enemy production buildings. By default, you don't even have to order them. They will attack the buildings because of the priority. And destroy the base while your units are killing the army. So yeah, very powerful units. A lot of players prefer to avoid them because yeah, they basically work as a cheat code of some sort because of the long range, and it's too damn cheap to use them, of course. So that's why usually in my videos you'll see me trying to avoid Palindrons, but sometimes, hey, sometimes it's not bad to use them, of course. But yeah, I prefer to avoid them because goddamn they're super strong, can be super powerful. But yeah, remember, if they are like this, if they are packed, they cannot attack. You need to unpack them. When they are unpacked, they cannot move. So careful with that. If you can hit enemy units with Palindrons, it hurts a lot, okay? They can do a lot of damage. But prefer to have multiple Palindrons attacking at the same time because they have terrible aim. And use them mainly against buildings, especially the enemy production buildings, so you don't have to fight that many units at the enemy armies. Yeah. Or not in the enemy's army, of course. So yeah, focus the production buildings, try to destroy them from the distance if you're using Palindrons, and make sure to protect your Palindrons, otherwise, yeah, it's gonna hurt you. And if you want, use them against siege. I would recommend mainly, like, use them mainly against the siege units, because usually those are slow, those are sitting in place, and they are large, so it's a lot easier to hit the siege units. So yeah, Palindrons great against siege units. Otherwise, if the siege units get too close, yeah, Palindrons can die quite fast as well. So careful with that. Use them mainly against buildings, siege units. Make sure to protect them. That's all you need to know. Otherwise, yeah, it's gonna cost you. And now we're moving to the last unit, which are the throwers, the log thrower and the stone thrower. Now only two civs are not getting Palindrons, which are the Celts and the Norse. They actually get these two units, the throwers. Now what is the difference? They basically behave the same as Palindrons. When they are packed like this, they cannot attack, so you need to unpack them. And now they are immobilized, so yes, you cannot move them, but now they can attack. Again, they have long range, not that long as the Palindrons. You can see the log thrower has 41. The stone thrower also has only 41, but if you take a look, Palindrons have 55. So they have shorter range, but at the same time, you should notice that they have actually, there is some advantage for them, and that is the log throwers have actually bonus against infantry. And of course, the stone throwers don't. Well, I think stone throwers, are they getting? I don't remember. Goddamn. Yeah, for some reason, log throwers do get bonus against infantry, while the stone throwers don't. Yeah. Don't ask me why. Now, yeah, the nice thing is, as you can see, they are a lot faster to pack. Like, goddamn, this was a lot faster. They unpack real fast, and then they pack real fast. I think this was actually buffed for the throwers, so they are not so slow, which might be why it looks so weird a little bit when they're packing. Yeah, it looks a lot faster, of course. That would be why, because it was buffed at one moment, so they pack faster, so they get some advantage over Palintons. But anyway, one advantage, they take a lot less space, so you can see it's only 4 for both of these. After the champion upgrade, they take even less, only 3 population, so Palintons are always 5. They are slightly cheaper, so you can easily spam more of these. So yeah, you can have larger groups of these. They are cheaper, but of course at the same time they are weaker. Now, one good thing is champion upgrade actually grants them bonus against siege. So these are, I would say, more focused against the unit fight, unlike the Palintonauts. I would say they are slightly more accurate, but I'm not gonna like put my shoes on it or anything like that. But yeah, in my opinion, and from my personal experience, I feel like the throwers are a lot better against units than Palintonauts. They feel slightly more accurate, but at the same time, hey, the log throwers actually do get some bonus against infantry, so yeah, you can use them against infantry units. You can use them against the ranged units. And of course, you can use them against siege, which their champion upgrade also grants them bonus versus siege units. So yeah, if you wanna counter enemy siege units, throwers are good for that as well. Anyway, yeah, they are just most likely like weaker Palintons. You don't get that long range, but at the same time, these two ships don't really need it if you're going for the right build. So it might not be that necessary, but hey, it does not hurt to have some longer range. But anyway, yeah, like I said, I think they are more specialized against units. Now, one huge difference, and that's could be considered an advantage over the Palintonauts, is Palintonauts you need to repair. These guys, just like these rams, that's why I have them next to them. These guys actually can be healed, and only healed, okay? Remember, they can be only healed, and they cannot be repaired by your villagers. Although I'm not really sure right now. But I think you can only heal, you cannot repair with priest units. So yeah, if you're playing as scouts, you can use your druids to heal them if they are taking some damage. Log throwers, yeah, you can heal with your rhapsodes after fight. So, or you can just pack them and run away, and that should allow rhapsodes to heal them so they are not like in combat. But other than that, yeah, shorter range than Palintonauts, slightly cheaper, take less population, so you can have a lot more of these, which is nice sometimes. But other than that, yeah, limited by the fact that they need to unpack to actually be able to attack and become immobilized. So again, it's a little bit harder for them. And at that moment, yeah, it would be better if they had slightly longer range, of course, so they don't have to like pack and move so often. But luckily for you, hey, their packing is actually a lot faster than the Palintonauts, so that allows for some faster movement for them. But other than that, yeah, basically same thing as Palintonaut. So yeah, that's gonna be all from me. Hopefully I didn't forget. Remember, siege units, very expensive but also very powerful. Make sure to protect them with your other units because they can die quite fast. And when they die, yeah, it costs a lot of resources to replace them. So make sure to protect them. Beware of the enemy units that deal crush damage, so namely siege units like the ballistas, catapults, or even Palintonauts. So careful around those with your siege units. Careful around faster units like cavalry units that can get close, since a lot of those siege units have a minimum range, so they will not be able to attack when the enemy is too close. And also some units cannot really attack other units than buildings, okay? So or anything else than buildings. Okay, so careful with those. Yeah, be glad they cannot get super fast converted, because getting them used against you, that is not a nice feeling. But yeah, hopefully I did not forget anything, but tell me what you think. Did I forget something? Yeah, please remind me in the comment section. Maybe I can explain it there. But yeah, leave a comment. What do you think about this? Is there anything else I should mention? Did I forget something? If you enjoyed this, please press the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And yes, I'm going to continue with this because there are still many other units. And I am thinking, what's going to be next? I think there is one that I could get with first and then another. We'll see. Okay, but yeah. Hope you enjoyed this. This was Psychosaurus. I'll see you next time. Bye.